that exhibit's there in the back. The environmental cleanup, we are now trying to develop what I hope to heck is the final cleanup action plan. And that's going to be looking at Gamble Bay. All the stuff uplands above the water is complete. But now we have to finish the work in the bay. And in the bay, there's evidence that this has been an industrial site for 150 years. So those pilings, there's evidence in the sediments that the pilings have been here. They're not really high and hot, but the pilings are going to have to come out. So most of those creosote pilings are going to come out. And then the other issue out there is wood waste. So wood waste has deleterious effects, right? It uses up oxygen when it breaks down, and it irritates some of the microorganisms. And so we are now in a discussion with DOE and the tribes and DNR to talk about how much cleanup has to be done. We're not going to set that thing back. It is not going to be like it was 500 years ago. That is impossible to do. But we will arm wrestle over what is the reasonable amount. Our buddy and friend in this is the Department of Natural Resources. Both of us are what they call potentially liable parties, and we both share liability because DNR owns all those submerged lands underneath the bay where all those pilings were, and all that log rafting happened that helped feed the bay. So us and DNR are going to be sharing those responsibilities. And the hope is this year all the parties will come to an agreement, but it's a serious challenge. It's a serious challenge. One of the interesting things that's come out of this is at the end of last year, the legislature approved some funding for the cleanup project. The legislature approved $7 million to buy land on the shoreline. And as you know, one of the goals of the Kitsap Forest and Bay project is to preserve 2 miles of the shoreline as undeveloped. And so the legislature has come up with $7 million that could be used. And they also came up with money to relocate the sewer outfall so that gooey duck beds could get opened. And then an outfall would be removed from the canal. But we don't get any of that if we don't all agree and play nice in the cleanup. So, and the potential size of the cleanup could dwarf any of those other figures that I just talked to. So it's a real challenge for us right now. But there's at least, some good news, and that's going to help the Kitsap Forest and Bay project get at least started and kicked along. Okay. Kitsap Forest and Bay project, I just forgot to mention, we've been looking for public funding actually from day one for about 5 years. And one of the issues is if the land you're trying to sell into conservation doesn't have a wetland on it, if it doesn't have a stream on it, if it isn't on the shoreline, if it doesn't have a special habitat, there are really almost no grant programs to fund it. So regular old boring forest land doesn't have a lot of government programs. So what we found after all this time is we put a bunch of grants in for the shorelines. One of our other properties we call the Divide, apparently there's an old growth cedar grove really close to the tribal hatchery, really interesting wetland. That probably is going to attract some funding. But our challenge will be just the regular old forest land that is up behind town and is over in Hansville and is over in Kingston. Okay, the master plan. Sue, did we have some kind of picture like this in 2006?
Yes.
Yeah. So this picture's been hanging around on our website for a long time, pictures that look like this. So what these pictures are and what these pictures are not. First of all, after the mill shut down, the biggest concern, there's a bunch of concerns. So one of the concerns was the mill's going to shut the town down because it loses money. And owning a town is without a taxing authority, is kind of a bad business. We don't get any help with sewer, water. The highway's taken care of by the state, but otherwise we take care of the roads, we paint the houses, we do everything, and there is absolutely no government program or sewer district or water company here helping. So the biggest concern that a lot of folks had were we're going to shut the town down, The other concern was we just lost 85 great blue-collar jobs, and now there's not any working waterfront in Kitsap County. And so our company worked with Kitsap County for 2 years and came up with a new zoning code in 2000. And basically what it says is, in the areas where there's homes in the fields all out here, it called for residential development. That's what our zoning code allows. It allows it at the density that pretty closely approximates the town at its peak. Okay, so the town had many, if you look at some of these photos, had many more homes and had 2 hotels, restaurants. It had a ton of activity. Okay. After the service station got built in 1920, everybody stopped living in town. They didn't want to live on company property, so a lot of people started moving out and buying their own properties because they could commute. So that's what our zoning code is, and we've had that since 2000. And basically, in most of the upland grassy areas, it calls for housing at a density of 2.5 units for every acre. If you go to Paulsbo, those densities are anywhere from 4 to 5 plus per acre. So it's not really, it's not an urban density, but it certainly is not farm density either. But the town also needs a certain amount of critical mass to pay for all the stuff that keeps it alive, the water system, the sewer system, and all the rest of it. So, so that's most of the residential area. There is the Babcock Farm that's in the back. The Babcock Farm is a historic property that was sold out of the company's ownership decades ago. The Babcocks were from Maine. That farm supplied this town with dairy, produce, and oxen for logging. We bought that property back about 4 years ago. Okay? Property includes 40,000 feet of greenhouse, cold storage. You know, my dream would be someday there might be a winery up there, so guys got a dream and sort of keeping an agricultural theme. That's what you see on both of these plans. Then we have some commercial zoning, and that's this loop that we all know as Port Campbell. So that's got commercial zoning where we could add more stuff. And then there's the mill site. So the big difference between these two plans is just showing some diversity on how things can go on the mill site. The uses, each one of these things you can read through, these are the allowed uses. And the waterfront zone, people were thinking, let's get the sawmill back in the day, but they weren't really sure they wanted industry, so they put a bunch of other stuff in there too. So this is a plan that looks like, okay, well, let's go back to the old days and have this all, well, how would that look? What if it's all industrial? The plan over here is more of a mixed use. So it has residential, it has some industrial. If anybody knows, there's a marine science lab down on the mill site. We hope there's a lot more of that, so that's something that would work here. And it calls for a hotel, and it calls for some retail. Neither one of these plans, hope, is in our minds set in stone. There's no final answer. We've been working a lot on that plan because it's more balanced, has all kinds of different things on it, kind of fits with the town's history. But nothing is set in stone, including the fact that we've told environmental folks and tribes that we're open to selling some of the mill site into conservation if somebody's willing to pay for it. So that offer has been made, and you've read about it in the newspaper if you read the Kitsap Sun or the North Kitsap Herald. We've made that offer. So you will not see a marina on there. We have not proposed a marina, but nobody at the company's ruled a marina out. If you have strong feelings one way or another, you should put it in the suggestion box. Okay, our option agreement on the land expires in 2013, and we're just going to have to assess where things are and what the reality of extending the option is. I think some of the waterfront is going to get sold because of this funding that we talked about, but we're going to have to look ourselves seriously in the eye and say, where do we go from here? Our goal is to submit a plan by the end of 2012. So we have environmental guys and science guys and traffic engineer guys studying the traffic on the road. We have wetlands people that have done wetland studies. We're doing all those studies and biological assessments that you do to go through the complicated process of moving a project forward. The town's 120 acres plus that rural farm area. And so, you know, in our minds, it's never final, you know, until it's built. And so our minds are open, but as we get further along, we have to start to get more definitive on what we're going to submit. So, with that, what did I miss?
I think there are some stacks of that.
Okay. All right. These guys don't bite, so that's Sue Allison. She's running the project. You know, many of you know Shanna Smith. She runs the town. Sue Allison is our senior project manager and master coordinator of all of these efforts, including the cleanup, managing engineers, and all that. Our lead civil engineer and planning team is here. It's Triad and Associates. They are available to answer questions. Al Furry from Triad, he's a civil engineer. Jeff Cox, right there. And where's Ryan? So, you know, it's planning, landscape architecture and planning, project management. If I can't answer the question, you know, they can. If I can't answer it right now, we'll get back to you and email you with an answer. Who else is here? Wendy Liklama works for Olympic Property Group. Kelly works in town. Shanna Smith does something around here. Shanna runs a 3-ring circus. So under Shanna is 60 different leases, the weddings, the events, the sewer plant, the water system. She runs it all. It saved me a lot of headaches. Who did I miss from OPG? It's bad to miss your own people. Okay, I'm up for questions and answers.